Yeah,
Well, we're rolling, so whenever you want to start talking.
my name is Arthur Sheridan, and I was born in Chicago, Illinois on July 16th, 1925. Went to Senn High School, and after I graduated from Senn High School, uh, the Second World War was on, and I was concerned about how I would or wouldn't participate. My father had a small factory on the south side of Chicago on South State Street, and it was his desire. He manufactured electrical appliances, and it was his desire that I become an electrical engineer. And just right across the street was a college called the Armor Institute of Technology, which at that time was its name, but subsequently it became the Illinois Institute of Technology. So in compliance with my dad's wishes, and I say that in the sense that I was a terrible math student, I did enroll in the Armor Institute of Technology when I graduated from high school. And then I attended it for a few months, but I realized it just wasn't my cup of tea. So I finally went to my father, and since I was 17 years old at the time, I asked him if I could enlist in the service. I'd been in the ROTC and had been an officer there at Senn High School, and I thought that maybe that kind of service would be helpful, and I really wanted to fly airplanes. My dad had been a pilot some years ago, and so he finally acquiesced and allowed me to enlist, sign the papers and so on. So I went on into the service, and I couldn't get in the Air Corps because turned out I had a colorblind problem. So I was subsequently sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I went through the normal infantry basic training. So subsequent to the basic training, somewhere along the line, I apparently had taken some sort of test and had done very well in it. And that in turn allowed the Army, or suggested to the Army, that I be sent to Indiana University in what was then called the ASTP program. I believe that meant Army Student Training Program. And we were sent from Benning to Indiana University. And I remember getting off the train, being greeted by some lovely ladies in white uniforms, and we looked around and said, well, you know, how much KP do we have here, and how about guard duty, and the usual things that infantry people get concerned about. And we were quickly told, no, there is no KP. You'll eat in the regular student cafeteria, and there is no guard duty. You just have to go to class. So we were put up in the girls' dormitory, and of course the girls were moved out, which was one of the problems in life that one faces. In any event, we then went to class. The class was rather rigorous. It was several hours a day, had a little bit of drill, and then study time. And it was rather difficult class. If you dropped a pencil, you felt like you were a week behind, and you didn't dare get sick because you might get thrown out. One can't imagine what the course was, but since I wanted to get out of the Armor Institute because of engineering, I then unfortunately wound up at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, lovely area, not a military camp, but however, the course was, can you believe, engineering. Both fortunately for me, and on one hand unfortunately, the program broke out and was disbanded, and I was subsequently sent to Camp Campbell, Kentucky, to join the 20th Armored Division, and I was put into 70th Armored Infantry Battalion, Company C and 3rd Squad. I was an armored infantryman. We went through much training there, normal infantry training, and ultimately, as the war progressed in Europe, we were told that we were going to get ready to go to Europe to enter the war in fact. So knowing this was going to happen after several months, and in the interim I was getting bored there, so I tried to enlist as a paratrooper when they were looking for it. But apparently after going through the physical, the officer in charge thought maybe I was a little too light to be a paratrooper. And I think his comment was, "Son, you're a little light if you think if you jumped out of a plane you'd go up." At least that's as I remember it. After several months in basic training and additional infantry training as an armored division, and an armored division basically is made up of the tank group, the infantry group, artillery group, and so on. And our basic mission was to support, by and large, the armored tank groups. And so when it came time to go to Europe, we were then loaded up after a few interesting things. We used to go into Evansville, Indiana on occasion and stay at the McCurdy Hotel. I think that was the name of the hotel there. And occasionally we might not get back into camp on time. And this occurred just before we were going to load up to go on the troop train over to the East Coast to go board the ship for Europe. Well, of course, having missed some of the work at the camp, several buddies of mine, 4 or 5 who had overspent their leave, were assigned to some KP. Understand, if I remember correctly, our company commander was very disappointed in our little group of soldiers. So when we boarded the train, we reported for KP and got duty for a couple of days. And ultimately we landed in Massachusetts, I believe, in a camp there. I can't remember the city, but we were assembling our group there prior to boarding the ship for Europe. We did get some leave, and I remember being detailed one time as a MP in the local town, and it was a very interesting and, I should say, almost joyful experience with the way we were greeted by the various tavern owners and treated well during our scouring the city. We subsequently boarded a Liberty ship in a harbor on the East Coast and sailed for many days in a convoy to Europe. The bunks were typical of what was set up at that time for troop ships going to Europe, particularly small Liberty ships, and we almost slept on top of each other. And mess was kind of a funny thing, because when it came time to have lunch or dinner or eat, we would do it standing up in the mess hall, which was actually a long table. And as the ship rocked and rolled, my food might slide down to the guy next to me and then come to the center and then slide to the fellow to the right of me. And occasionally we might have taken a bite or two out of somebody else's food. Ultimately, after several passes at landing in Europe, we did land at the port of Le Havre. And by that time that had been taken, of course, for several months by the Allied forces, so there was no landing like you see on D-Day and on the beaches of France, Omaha, and so forth. It was a normal landing at a dock, and took several days to get into the harbor at Le Havre, because we were told that there were some submarines, German submarines, patrolling the channel, and they didn't want to get the convoy caught up in that. So when we finally got off the ship, we would dump our duffel bags off the side of the wharf and then assemble, get in the 4x4 trucks, and moved off into a camp area where we were assembling in order to get our equipment. Of course, it took several days for our equipment to get unloaded and assembled to where we could get to it. The tanks, the half tracks in which the infantry traveled, and whatever motor vehicles and supply vehicles that had to be there to form up what was known as the 20th Armored Division. After we gathered up, we started to move through France, Belgium, and I believe Holland into Germany. The war had moved on, and we actually didn't enter into any combat until we were into Germany. In Germany, whether or not the wall went all the way around the town, we were at the entrance of the walled city. And he looked up at me and said, "I say there, old chap, we've just taken over this town and this camp. We came from the Jersey Titans, and we were captured very early in the war. And if you'll just go straight through, I'm sure you'll be safe and taken care of." My jaw dropped, all of our jaws dropped. But these were the people that had been captured very early in the war when the Germans got opposed to France, went into the Jersey Islands and took these people off. In any event, we progressed down the road, went through the city of Trondheim, where we attacked the brewery and loaded all of our 5-gallon cans. Very important operation. The military governor, after we established ourselves in a bivouac outside of town, would allow us to send a hand back into town one evening, every evening, providing we had the occupation money. You may or may not know that we issued occupation money
and share with us
to buy things with
some
anybody
reflections.
Well, this military governor, who was a colonel, took the occupation money, would allow us to fill our tracks. Then we went on, we were attacked by some skirmishing with
Describe,
German
discuss
we went some minefield areas.
impressions of what it
War
was.
with all it. We were fighting a war, we were part of it. We could move rather quickly until we run out of gas, and then every so often we had to wait for somebody to brought us gas. As we were heading toward Munich, we then approached a village that we knew nothing about. What I'd like you to do is you got that. All right, I'll tell you a little bit about the story. We got close to it, and one of our tanks had knocked down the brick door, the big door that was far in the entrance. But then we sent some tracks on the side that we were backing up. It knocked down the vent, my background. And as we entered it, we saw a friend back there eats up the projector, because I do have a few photos. Many people, not many men show, but I've had in ragged clothes and